It's Nolan. What's going on, beautiful people? It's the kid J Nolan here. Welcome back to another episode of Inside the Industry, your number one source for music, entertainment, commentary, and breakdowns. Big Dog is officially out today. I've been telling y'all about this record for the last couple weeks, letting y'all know it's really been on the way for shit. It was supposed to be out toward the end of last month. But you know, my original distributor, I told y'all they dropped the ball. I don't want to stay on their head top for too long about it, but that's what happened. So that's what happened. But it's officially out today. It's available on all platforms. All you got to do is check out the pinned comment in my comments. It'll take you right to the song. And you can choose to listen to it on whichever platform you're partial to, whether that be Spotify, Apple, Tidal, Amazon, etc. All right. Hey man. That boy Diddy been under fire for some time now, and it don't seem like the fire is letting up no time soon. We got Don Richard from Danny Kane, Diddy Dirty Money, coming out and letting it all hang out, as a matter of fact, because she has a lawsuit detailing all forms of misconduct, exploitation, SA, all types of stuff going on behind the scenes that she's been holding to close to the vest for many years. And today she's finally letting it out. A lawsuit has been filed. You know, I'm gonna just go ahead and say, man, I wasn't sure if she was ever gonna come out and let it be known what she witnessed or had been privy to or been subjected to during her time on Bad Boy Entertainment, during her time in the group, or during her time in the other group, Dirty Money. I mean, she even recently worked with him on the Love album for some of it. You know what I'm saying? So I wasn't sure. Like when Aubrey came out and she said that all of the ladies from the group were offered, you know, the publishing rights to their music. Aubrey said, I don't want that shit. Right? You waited till it was no longer valuable. It's only worth so much. She was willing to pay off the other ladies in the group so that they didn't have to take it because she felt it was disrespectful and it wasn't worth anything, right? And she didn't want that bloody money or dirty money. So she said that there was other ladies in the group that didn't feel the same as her, might have taken their portion of their publishing. We don't know exactly who those people are, but I guess you can deduce that Dawn may have taken it because she went back and worked with them, right? I don't know, man. This stuff gets very interesting. I'm not in the business of victim blaming, victim shaming, but I'm sure there's some people out there that look at this with a watchful eye, to say the least. But we're gonna get into her lawsuit. We're gonna get into everything that she's saying, all of her allegations against him, and I'm gonna be the first to tell y'all, I'm not gonna negate what she's talking about. There's too many people that have pretty much the same story about Diddy. There was a lot of people who remained on the fence when the Cassie story originally broke last year. And this year we got a fucking horrific dose of the truth behind closed doors of what that relationship was like. We just got one video, and just imagine how things were for years. In Dawn's lawsuit, she also bears witness to this same form of treatment towards Cassie, as well as Kim Porter. So there's a lot to be unpacked here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the lawsuit. We're going to go through it. I also have footage of an interview that Dawn did some time ago where she talked about her experience in going through that whole making the band ordeal and some of the I guess you could say verbal accosting that was directed towards her. Some of the conflict that was going on behind the scenes while she was on the show. I believe she was formerly in a record deal prior to going on the show, and Diddy needed to basically buy her out of said contract in order for her to be a part of the Danny Kane group. But there was a lot of turmoil going on behind the scenes that, of course, we didn't know about because it wasn't necessarily aired on TV. So we're going to show that as well. But first thing we're going to do is go through this lawsuit. You know how we do it over here. It's 55 pages. I'm going to try to skim through, some of the repetitive nature of the lawsuit. If something gets too much where they're repeating themselves, I'm just going to skip. But y'all know how we do over here, man. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but for those that have been here, y'all know. All right, so give me a second. I'm going to go ahead and get right into this thing. All right, so bear with me. Let me put myself in the corner. And we're off to the races, okay? So here we are, United States District Court, Southern District of New York, Don Angelique Richard, plaintiff versus Sean Combs, Harv Pierre, Remote Productions Incorporated, New Remote Productions Incorporated, the Nordlinger Group, LLC, November. There's a lot of motherfuckers in here. November 15th, LLC, Daddy's House Recording Studio, Bad Boy Entertainment, LLC, Bad Boy Records, the Holdings Company, man. Just too many to fucking name. Damn. Anything associated with this nigga? Ciroc? His mama? Love Records? Man, let's get to this shit. All right, so we've got plaintiff Dawn Angelique Richard buying through her attorneys, the Bloom Firm, an IP legal studio LLC, brings this action against defendants. Miss Richard alleges upon knowledge concerning her own experience and upon information and belief as to all other matters. Preliminary statement. Let me see. Is this y'all can see this? Dawn Angelique Richard, known professionally as Dawn Richard, is an American musician, singer, songwriter, and performer. She gained widespread recognition as a member of the girl group Danity Kane, formed by defendant Sean Combs, and later transitioned into a key member of Mr. Combs' band Diddy Dirty Money. Defendant Sean Combs, a once celebrated hip-hop mogul popularly known by his stage names Puff Daddy, Puffy, P. Diddy, Diddy, or Love, skyrocketed to fame in the late 1990s and became a powerful and enduring figure in the music and entertainment industry. In 1998, Mr. Combs explained the origins of his stage name in a USA Today interview, his nickname Puff, because he had a temper, and was also known to huff and puff when he was angry. All right. Over the decades following his rise to fame, Mr. Combs' star-studded, larger-than-life persona overshadowed his vicious temper and pervasive acts of violence directed towards those in his inner circle, specifically women. Mr. Combs' namesake temper frequently manifested in physical violence. Mr. Combs regularly hurled objects in fits of rage, often throwing items such as mobile phones, laptops, food, and studio equipment across the room or at people. On numerous occasions, Miss Richard witnessed Mr. Combs brutally beat his girlfriend, Miss Cassandra Cassie Ventura. His persistent abuse included choking and strangling her, striking her with his hands and with objects, slapping, punching, and throwing items, including a scolding hot pan, all of which we can attest to from that hotel footage. We saw him slamming her on the ground. We saw him kick her. We also saw him throw a vase in her direction. So let's just keep it all in perspective. We have visuals to go with what she's alleging here. But a scolding hot pan, you deserve to fry in hell. On many occasions, Miss Richard tried to intervene, offering Miss Ventura support and encouragement to leave Mr. Combs. Each time, Mr. Combs learned of her efforts to help Miss Ventura and became enraged, threatening Miss Richard's life with statements such as, "You want to die today? I make niggas go missing and I end people." So these are quotations that Dawn is saying he used to throw in her direction whenever she tried to intervene. Compounding Mr. Combs' violent acts and death threats, he flagrantly exploited Miss Richard's musical talent as a singer and writer while withholding rightful earnings, stealing her copyrighted works, and subjecting her to years of inhumane working conditions, which included groping, assault, and false imprisonment, among other violations. Here's where we get into the stuff directly imposed upon Dawn. For nearly a decade, Mr. Combs manipulated Miss Richard with mantras, that submission to his depraved demands was necessary for career advancement, instilling in her the belief that such abuse and exploitation were required for female artists to succeed in the music industry. It was not until Miss Ventura's bravery in coming forward that Miss Richard realized her own personal suffering was tied to the many years of abuse by Mr. Combs that had become normalized for her. So he groomed her into this abuse, and basically it became normal. And she wasn't even one of his romantic interests like that, although it seems that he definitely forced some form of intimacy upon her. As more women courageously come forward, Plaintiff has been empowered by this collective strength and now adds her voice to the growing chorus of victims bravely sharing their harrowing stories. Together, they seek justice and stand in solidarity as the latest victims of the Me Too movement in the music industry. Parties. Ms. Dawn Angelique Richard is a resident of the state of California and was employed by defendants Remote Productions Incorporated, New Remote Productions Incorporated, Bad Boy Entertainment, Bad Boy Records, Bad Boy Entertainment Holdings, Bad Boy Productions Holdings, Bad Boy Books Holdings, the Sean Combs Music Incorporated, Sean Combs Capital LLC, Combs Enterprises LLC from 2005 until 2012. At all relevant times herein, Ms. Richard met the definition of an employee of defendant Bad Boy Records and related entities. At all relevant times herein, Ms. Richard was a resident of the state of New York. Defendant Sean Combs, upon information and belief, resides within the state of California. At all relevant times herein, Mr. Combs met the definition of an employer of Ms. Richard under all relevant statutes. Defendant Harv Pierre, upon information and belief, resides within the state of New Jersey. At all times relevant herein, Defendant Harv Pierre was the president of Bad Boy Entertainment and Bad Boy Records in New York and met the definition of an employer of Ms. Richard under all relevant statutes. Okay. Defendants, Remote Productions Inc. and New Remote Productions Inc. are Delaware corporations and television production companies which, upon information and belief, were created by Mr. Combs to produce, making the band in New York and in California. At all relevant times herein, RPI and NRPI employed Ms. Richard under all relevant statutes. So this is the production company behind the television show Making the Band. Defendant, the Nordlinger Group LLC, is a finance firm with its principal place of business in New York and on information and belief was employed by other named defendants herein to pay and account to Ms. Richard pursuant to her employment with other named defendants. On information and belief, the Nordlinger Group LLC formed November 15 LLC for purposes of dispersing funds relative to Making the Band. So these are the companies that paid them while on TV. Upon information and belief, defendant's Daddy House Recording Studio is a New York corporation and a music recording studio owned by defendant Bad Boy Records in New York. At all relevant times herein, Ms. Richard was an employee required to work at said studio. Defendant Bad Boy Entertainment LLC is a music, media, and entertainment company founded by defendant Sean Combs, which includes the record label Defendant Bad Boy Records LLC. Defendant Bad Boy LLC is a Delaware limited liability company and successor in interest to RPI. At all relevant times herein, Bad Boy Entertainment LLC met the definition of an employer. So she's just laying out all of the people, or all of the entities, I should say more specifically, that she worked under in association with Diddy. We're going to skip through some of this because when I say it gets too repetitive, that's what I mean. We've got Sean Combs, Music Inc. We've got Universal Music Group in here. We've got Geffen, which is a subsidiary of Interscope, which is a subsidiary, of course, of UMG. It's a lot going on here. We got Diageo, from De Leon. We've got Ciroc in here, which I'm sure she's done advertisements for all of these companies as well, which is why they're named. We've got Diddy's mother, Janice Combs Publishing Inc. It's been said over the years that Miss Janice Combs is also a holder of many of Bad Boy artists' publishing. Although she never produced anything, wrote anything in the studio, no less, her fucking son didn't do the work either. But for whatever reason, he was giving her some sort of, rights to these artists' music. Diabolical. We've got Sony in here, Sony Music Publishing. We've got Love Records, which is a newly formed company within the last few years. We've got Epic Records, which is a subsidiary of Sony. So that just lays everything out, right? Now, let's get into the allegations. Factual allegations. Ms. Richard is selected to be in Mr. Combs' all-female music group, Danity Kane, after competing on MTV's Making the Band. So we're starting all the way from the beginning. In or around 2004, Ms. Richard was selected to participate in season 3 of MTV Network's reality television show, Making the Band. The show centered around the formation and development of a new musical group under the mentorship of Mr. Combs. The contestants would compete and be chosen by Mr. Combs to form a band, which would go on to create albums and perform. For aspiring artists like Ms. Richard, Making the Band represented a concrete path to a career in the entertainment industry. Ms. Richard appeared in seasons 3 and 4 of Making the Band, which first aired in 2005, and in season 5 of Making His Band, which aired in 2009, a show that I never even saw. Out of thousands of contestants, Ms. Richard, along with approximately 12 other women, were selected to participate in season 3 of Making the Band. 5 women, including Ms. Richard, were ultimately chosen to be in the group Danity Kane, which was named by Ms. Richard. I'm sure she has no trademark ownership of that name, but it comes from her. Prior to and including the first Danity Kane album, Making the Band was filmed entirely at Daddy's House Recording Studio at 3120 West 44th Street, New York, New York. The Making the Band content that focused on Danity Kane's work on his second album, Welcome to the Dollhouse, was filmed at Daddy's house and Mr. Combs' Miami residence. Other Making the Band episodes included LA as a third filming location. Upon information and belief to create Making the Band, camera crews filmed 24 hours a day. 24 hours? Gathering months worth of footage to condense into mere hours of entertainment for viewers. Danity Kane released his self-titled debut album in August 2006 and its second album, Welcome to the Dollhouse, in March 2008. Danity Kane's first album sold over 4 million copies. I didn't know they were that popular. I remember them being on TV, but damn. You know, I was just a kid, so how the fuck would I have known? But they did 4 milli. Damages to Miss Richard for unpaid salaries are estimated at $1 million. Danity Kane's second album, Welcome to the Dollhouse, sold over 2 million copies. Damages to Miss Richard for unpaid salaries and royalties are estimated at $500K. Damages on unpaid wages for touring on over 100 dates for Miss Richard with Danity Kane are estimated at $1.8 million. Mr. Combs fired bandmate Aubrey O'Day and Juanita D. Woods. Shout out to D. Woods. I think she's still out here in the 80s days. From Danity Kane on live television at the height of their fame in 2008, which resulted in Danity Kane being disbanded in 2009. Although they're a multi-platinum group, they should have been able to make more money. His temper forced them to disband. Miss Richard first encounters Mr. Combs' aggressive, intimidating behavior and animus toward women. During the auditions and on the set of Making the Band, Mr. Combs projected an aura of superiority, wealth, and power. Mr. Combs regularly wore sunglasses and avoided looking the female contestants in their eyes, contributing to an atmosphere of uncertainty and intimidation, which we all saw and felt through the screen while watching the show. During auditions, Mr. Combs spoke to the female contestants in a hostile, condescending manner, making disparaging gender-based remarks such as calling them fat, ugly, bitches, and hoes. Miss Richard felt threatened and intimidated by Mr. Combs' blatant disdain for the young women like herself, who were excited for the opportunity to be on his show. Once the band was made, Mr. Combs' contempt for women was readily apparent as he continued to display aggressive and hostile behavior towards Miss Richard and her all-female Danity Kane bandmates. Mr. Combs regularly referred to the 5 women as bitches and hoes once again and denigrated their physical appearances. By way of example, Mr. Combs stated that Miss Richard was too skinny and needed to do something about this face, or her face, more specifically. And we've got video of her speaking on this, which we will pull up later, but we're going to get through the lawsuit first. On one occasion in or around 2005, during the first season of Making the Band 3, Miss Rashard observed Mr. Combs' ex-partner and the mother of 3 of his children, Miss Kim Porter, leaving Mr. Combs' recording studio in tears with visible facial injuries, including a lacerated lip. So this is another account of Diddy being overly aggressive. We'll just say that for, discretion purposes with Miss Kim Porter, which we've heard for years that was going on behind the scenes. But now all of this information is finally coming to a head. We are in this age where all things done in the dark shall come to the light. Realizing that Mr. Combs was capable of committing acts of violence against women caused Miss Rashard to feel deep, apprehension and fear that Mr. Combs could one day physically harm her. Miss Rashard was present when Mr. Combs was introduced to Cassie for the first time in or around 2006. The moment Mr. Combs first saw her, his demeanor noticeably shifted. Mr. Combs positioned himself directly in front of Miss Ventura's seat, invading her personal space and fixated on her with an intense, unyielding stare, isolating her from the other people in the room, including Miss Ventura's then boyfriend, music producer Ryan Leslie. So this is interesting. Y'all remember that stare off Diddy had on that motherfucking TV show with the nigga that looked like Odell Beckham? That's down there what she just described here. First time he saw her, he positioned himself right in front of her, invading her space with her nigga right there. And he in a whole nother zone. Fuck him. I want you. Crazy work. Coincidentally, this first meeting between Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura was the first time that Miss Rashard was in Combs' presence without a camera crew filming. Observing Mr. Combs behave in such an intimidating, predatory manner for the first time that they were off camera made Miss Rashard feel deeply apprehensive and afraid of him. Subsequently, Miss Ventura ended her relationship with Mr. Leslie and began dating Mr. Combs, who would become violent and abusive towards her. He isolated her away from him. Danity Kane, harassment, inhumane treatment, and denial of basic needs. Jesus. For the majority of Miss Rashard's tenure as a member of Danity Kane and Diddy Dirty Money, Mr. Combs required her to remain at his various residences and studios in New York, Los Angeles, Florida, and New Jersey for activities such as recording, rehearsing, dressing, preparing costumes, and exercise. Throughout the productions of Making the Band 3 and 4, Mr. Combs deprived Miss Rashard and her Danity Kane bandmates of basic needs such as adequate food and sleep. When Miss Rashard and her Danity Kane bandmates requested meals or rest, Mr. Combs refused and chastised them with derogatory comments like, "You bitches don't want this," or "Y'all are not hungry enough." It's crazy to say somebody not hungry enough when they're literally asking you for food. What was that shit he had going on? No bitch assness? Sounds like it was full of it from him. He says, "And I'm paying you bitches to work." So basically they're on call to work 24/7 as long as the money is going out. Even though it wasn't being dispersed to them necessarily, it was someone was paying for the studio time and other things to be in production. This demeaning behavior gradually undermined Miss Rashard's confidence and contributed significantly to her growing feelings of insecurity and fear of reprisal from Mr. Combs. Upon information and belief, hold on, y'all. My camera wigging, ain't it? Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs would regularly be awake for prolonged periods of time because he was high on drugs. During these periods, Mr. Combs demanded continuous access to Miss Rashard and her Danity Kane bandmates, often forcing them to record and rehearse for stretches of 36 to 48 hours without breaks. Which you can't even, you can't even really produce your highest quality level of music if you're being deprived of food, if you're overworking your vocals, if you're not getting adequate rest. So then when you go in the studio and you're putting this stuff down and then he's making you re-record this shit over and over, you're fucking putting down, below average quality, and he's going to continue to chastise you on how to perform it better, even though you probably would perform it better if you were being properly taken care of. Catch 22. Forced to choose between eating and sleeping, Miss Richard lost a significant amount of weight, weighing approximately 100 pounds at the height of 5'4". Miss Richard began to normalize these extreme conditions and perceived them as standard requirements of her participation in Danity Kane. Mr. Combs regularly sent his associates to wake Miss Richard and her Danity Kane bandmates in the overnight hours so he could watch them rehearse. So surprising them in their sleep, saying, get up and rehearse. The regularity of these disturbances led Miss Richard to adapt by sleeping in a sitting position, fully dressed and with makeup on, heightening her anxiety. Let's stop there. So he would literally pester them so much in their sleep that she adapted by saying, you know what? I'm going to sleep sitting upright with a full face of makeup on and clothing on. So when y'all niggas come, y'all ain't even going to really know I'm asleep. I'm going to just say I was resting my eyes. I'm ready. That's crazy. Over time, this abnormal sleeping arrangement came to feel routine, further normalizing Mr. Combs' invasive demands. In addition to exhausting rehearsals, Mr. Combs required Miss Richard and her bandmates to participate in intense workouts with a personal trainer. On one occasion, while running on the beach, Miss Richard became so dehydrated that she vomited. Instead of offering medical assistance, MTV News camera crew filmed the entire incident, contributing to her acceptance of such treatment as part of her professional life. So everything was pretty much fair game to be documented on camera, even against, the actual betterment of their condition. Nah, the show must go on. The unrelenting and rigorous schedule of rehearsals, performance, and near constant filming that Mr. Combs imposed caused Miss Richard to experience extreme weight loss, dehydration, fatigue, painful rashes from the microphone pack she was required to wear on her back. That's nasty. Probably because she was sweating so much with that thing on her. These conditions intensified Miss Richard's feelings of powerlessness, as she increasingly viewed them as part of her professional reality and feared the consequences of any resistance. In a further assertion of power and dominance, Mr. Combs insisted on holding meetings while dressed only in his underwear. You crazy ass, nasty ass fuck nigga. This ain't the first time we've heard about this nigga being privy or at meetings wearing less than adequate clothing, right? This is about the second lawsuit we've talked about where he's imposing himself wearing underwear. There's another incident where he was basically in his boxers and a robe coming out of an office with another artist. This nigga weird. On one occasion in 2008, at his Miami residence, Mr. Combs emailed Miss Richard directing her to meet him in the living room. When she arrived, he was only wearing his underwear. Miss Richard asked Mr. Combs to put clothes on. He refused, stating, "This is my fucking house." Mr. Combs then conducted a meeting lasting approximately an hour while dressed in his underwear, causing Miss Richard to feel violated and embarrassed and amplifying her feelings of powerlessness. Following the official Danity Kane breakup in early 2009, effectuated by Mr. Combs, Miss Dawn Richard experienced significant financial hardship. With no prospective opportunities for employment within the entertainment field, Miss Richard spent several months traveling from Baltimore to Daddy's House recording studio in New York without pay or allocated budget. Mr. Combs promised that Miss Richard's compositions would result in payment of license fees and royalties pursuant to her contract with Bad Boy Records. However, no such compensation was ever reported or paid to Miss Richard. Damages relative to this continuing copyright infringements will be proved at trial. Okay, so after the band was already disbanded, everybody else was sent home. He kept her behind and kept having her travel back and forth from Baltimore to New York to keep working on music for him that she wasn't being paid for, right? I'm quite sure, as we see, the Diddy Dirty Money saga is right there below that these recordings that she was working on probably were going toward that particular project. Diddy Dirty Money, Miss Richard's experiences Mr. Combs' gender-based physical violence, criminal acts, SA, threats, and intimidation. By approximately the fall of 2009, many of Miss Richard's compositions had been recorded by other bad boy artists. All right, so she's in there writing and recording. Then next thing you know, the music she's working on ends up with other people. Okay? Due to the success of her compositions, Miss Richard was invited to meet with musical artist Kalina Harper, and shortly thereafter, Mr. Combs, Miss Richard, and Miss Harper formed a new group, Diddy Dirty Money. So she's literally recording because her life depends on it in her eyes. Some people might say, well, why didn't she go out and get another deal or something of that effect? But it's already been shown in other instances that Diddy will sully your name to anyone else interested in you, right? Because of course, if you're associated with him, people in the industry are going to come talk to him about you first. Hey, are you still working with her? What's her status? Is she a free agent? What's the deal? And depending on his response to them, it could be a number of things. He could say, oh, nah, she's still with me. He could say, oh, nah, she has a terrible work ethic, a bad attitude, poor, you know what I'm saying? Poor studio etiquette, man. You don't want to work with her. And niggas might take that word for it. So many things he could do just to keep you in his proximity, despite the fact that he said he didn't want you or your group. Initial recording for Diddy. Dirty Money's album, Last Train to Paris, took place in Mr. Combs' home on Donny Drive in Los Angeles, California. On the first day of recording, Miss Richard and Miss Harper arrived at Mr. Combs' home and waited in the kitchen where Mr. Combs' girlfriend, Miss Ventura, was frying eggs for him. Miss Richard observed Mr. Combs coming down the stairs, looking high on drugs. He entered the kitchen, approached Cassie, and screamed, "I've been asking you for my shit. I can't stand you, bitch. You never do it right." This is a quote from Diddy to Cassie. Mr. Combs then pushed Miss Ventura against the wall, choked her, and then picked up the scalding hot pan of eggs and threw it at her, causing her to fall to the ground in a fetal position. Cursing and screaming, Mr. Combs dragged Miss Ventura up the stairs. And again, we've seen him drag her as well. This is fucking heinous, bro. Somebody should have been did the deed on this nigga. Sadly, if somebody had already did the deed on this nigga, he would have gone down as a legend rather than getting this humiliation while living. Frozen in shock and terror, Miss Richard heard glass shattering, crashing, and banging noises as Mr. Combs dragged Miss Ventura up the stairs. Miss Richard wanted to intervene and help Miss Ventura, but Miss Kalina Harper adamantly refused to interfere in Mr. Combs' relationship and physically led Miss Richard out of the residence. Terrified and shaken, Miss Richard returned to her hotel, where she was unable to sleep due to worrying about Cassie and her own safety. The following day, Miss Richard received a call demanding that she return to Mr. Combs' residence and to continue recording. Mr. Combs brought Miss Richard and Miss Harper into the recording room at this studio, locked the door, dimmed the lights, and gave each of them flowers. So now he's trying to charm them. Mr. Combs went on at length stating, "This is normal. This was just a lover's argument where no one was hurt. This is what love is. I'm giving you an opportunity. If you want to make it, you'll shut your mouth. If you say anything, there will be consequences." So he comes in, he leads with some sort of, I wouldn't say remorse, but he's trying to be somewhat softer to them, giving flowers and trying to give them a motivational speech. And, this is just love. Nobody was really hurt. It's all good. But then he gets a little bit menacing toward the end. Say something, it's going to be consequences. He further warned that people end up missing, being threatened while locked in a room for over 20 minutes in a small enclosed space with Mr. Combs and observing him violently assault Miss Ventura the day before, Miss Richard was terrified and genuinely believed that Mr. Combs would follow through on those threats. In or around November 2009, after the Soul Train Awards in Atlanta, Mr. Combs flew Dawn and Miss Harper to his house in New York on his private jet for an after party. There were many well-known celebrities at the after party, and copious amounts of illegal drugs were openly consumed. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs had arranged for dozens of young women and girls, some of whom appeared to be underage, to be transported to the party. Now, this is interesting because we just had a nigga from the motherfucking Mexican cartel say that Diddy approached him to bring young women into the country. Now we've got Dawn saying that he transported young women to an after party in New York at his home. I just wanted to let the beat breathe for a second. Let's continue. The women arrived wearing little to no clothing and were given drugs and alcohol. Many of them appeared lethargic or passed out, while Mr. Combs and his guests performed sexual acts on them. Miss Richard believed that her presence at the party was a test to see whether he could trust her. Mr. Combs repeatedly said things like, "This is a buffet. Enjoy yourselves. This is what we do. This is how we party." He called it a buffet. Miss Richard felt shocked and horrified at the sight of Mr. Combs and his guests violating incapacitated young women and implored Mr. Combs' personal assistant at the time, Capricorn Clark, to allow her to leave. Miss Clark insisted that Miss Richard wait 15 minutes for Miss Clark to make it make sense. That is, to make Miss Richard's exit less conspicuous so that Mr. Combs would not notice that she had left. So Miss Capricorn was basically like, yo, wait 15 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Act like you enjoying the scene, right? We'll get you up out of there. But if you leave too soon, he's going to question what the hell's going on and is going to, probably lead to another outburst. Miss Richard experienced feelings of panic and being trapped against her will. Mr. Combs regularly placed Miss Richard in similar situations with no means to escape. At Mr. Combs' drug-fueled parties, his guests, including Miss Richard, were required to surrender their phones upon entry. We even saw him surrendering his children's phones when they was going out to have a good time. Mr. Combs kept the doors locked and guarded by security personnel, making it impossible for Miss Richard to leave without alerting Mr. Combs that she had done so. Mr. Combs hired police officers to attend his party, sending a clear message to guests that his influence extended to law enforcement officers and creating a climate of fear and a tacit warning that reporting him to authorities would be both unacceptable and futile. Once again, we hear about him hiring police that were there to work for him. So what you would think would be police actually making sure that everything is okay on the premises, they're actually making sure that everyone is performing in line to his desires. On many occasions, Mr. Combs had parties at his Miami, Florida residence that lasted for several days. At one of the parties, Miss Richard witnessed Mr. Combs openly stating that he had arranged for busloads of young exotic girls, such as mixed black and Asian, Indonesian, and albino. Once again, Miss Richard observed inebriated young girls being violated by Mr. Combs and his guests. In a state of panic and terror, Miss Richard fled to the bathroom Mr. Combs had insisted she stay in and barricaded the door shut with furniture. Now remember, Lil Rod explicitly spoke in his lawsuit about parties in Miami, Florida, and he was actually the one that was forced to put on a bad boy hat and go obtain these exotic girls. But of course, by the time we get to 2019, 2020, and all of this other, updated times, he was sending Lil Rod to a specific area where these women already knew what was up. He would just have to go obtain them. Once they saw the hat, they knew, okay, Diddy wants us. Mr. Combs openly assaulted Miss Ventura in front of Miss Richard and other witnesses on multiple occasions. On one occasion, in or around the fall of 2009, Diddy Dirty Money was in New York preparing to perform at a festival. Inside their vehicle, Mr. Combs grabbed Miss Ventura's neck, pulled her out of the van onto the grass, pinned her head down, choking while yelling, "You gonna get fucked up today." This incident took place in the backstage area just outside the festival and was entirely visible to passersby. In another instance, in or around early 2010, Mr. Combs punched Miss Ventura in the face in the bathroom of a party in Los Angeles. Frequently, when Miss Ventura attempted to voice an opinion or stand up to Mr. Combs, he would strike her or wrap his hands around her throat. On the first several occasions that they observed Mr. Combs assault Miss Ventura, Miss Richard and Miss Harper spoke with Cassie to support and encourage her in escaping this abusive relationship with Diddy. Every time that Miss Richard and Miss Harper tried to intervene, Mr. Combs learned of the conversation and became irate. Mr. Combs screamed at the women, "Y'all bitches don't get in my relationship. Don't tell my bitch, aka Cassie, what she need to be doing. Just make money and shut the fuck up. I end artists, I shelve careers. You could be missing. And you bitches want to die today," among other threats. So these are a series of different quotes that he hurled in their direction. Now we've gotten Miss Richard saying Interscope Records enabled this violence, which also is an allegation made by Lil Rod. But he put Universal. Unfortunately, he was forced to take them out. In or around late 2009 or early 2010, Bad Boy Entertainment entered an agreement with Interscope Gavin A&M Records. Upon information and belief, Bad Boy was paid $50 million in exchange for Bad Boy's future releases being distributed through Interscope. In doing so, Mr. Combs intended to capitalize on Interscope's significant resources and enhance the promotion and sales of Bad Boy releases, including Diddy Dirty Money's upcoming album. They paid this man $50 million. What did they get out of the deal? In the weeks and months leading up to the Bad Boy Interscope deal, Mr. Combs had frequent meetings with producer, then CEO Interscope Records, Jimmy Iovine. On one such occasion, Combs hosted a dinner at a West Hollywood restaurant, which Miss Richard and Miss Harper were required to attend. Among the guests at the dinner were celebrities like Neo, Usher, and as well as Mr. Iovine. At the dinner, Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura had an argument in front of other dinner guests. Mr. Combs hissed at Miss Ventura in a screaming whisper and forcefully punched her in the stomach, causing her to double over in visible pain, crying. She said this man punched her in front of everybody, in front of Neo, Usher, and more. And we already know Usher done witnessed all type of shit. So by the time we get to his relationship with Cassie, he probably feel like, shit, I done seen him do this so many other times. And we now see what type of guy Neo is. Woo! Miss Clark escorted Miss Ventura out of the restaurant, and that's Capricorn, the assistant at the time. Escorted Cassie out of the restaurant, and Mr. Combs remained and continued socializing with guests. At this point, Interscope Records clearly had actual knowledge that Combs was dangerous around females and that Combs was willing to brazenly batter one in public. Even after Mr. Iovine watched Mr. Combs commit a violent assault in front of numerous high-profile witnesses, the Bad Boy Interscope deal took place and remained in effect, providing Mr. Combs with immense financial rewards and enabling him to commit further acts of violence without fear of repercussions. Now remember, Jimmy Iovine got some weird cases out on himself as well that came out within the last year or two. He's been fighting them, but they're out there. So let's keep that in perspective as well, because he witnessed it and didn't do shit. Now we see there's allegations that he's into the same type shit. Okay? All right, where was I at? Watching Mr. Combs openly assault Ms. Ventura in front of Mr. Iovine and various celebrities, and observing that other powerful music industry representatives were complicit in his behavior, this amplified Ms. Richard's fears that Mr. Combs could one day harm her and that his actions would be accepted and normalized by everyone surrounding him. As part of the agreement between Bad Boy and Interscope, they heavily promoted Diddy Dirty Money's Last Train to Paris album. Mr. Iovine had presented Mr. Combs with a demo of Coming Home for him to produce, a song that would become a multi-platinum hit. Mr. Iovine was encouraging Mr. Combs to develop a new sound for the album, into which Interscope was investing significant resources. Ms. Richard, Ms. Harper, and Ms. Ventura all provided vocal performances for said project. Released in November 2010, the album Last Train to Paris became Diddy Dirty Money's most commercially successful project, providing vast financial rewards to both Interscope and Mr. Combs. In or around the fall of 2009, okay, so this is about labor trafficking and oppressive working conditions here. In or around the fall of 2009, Diddy Dirty Money began recording the song Love Comes Down. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs continued to use drugs that caused him to remain awake for prolonged periods of time. When he was awake, he would demand that Miss Richard and Miss Harper record in the studio, where they could spend 3 to 4 consecutive days without recording without a break to eat or sleep. Mr. Combs required Miss Richard and Miss Harper to remain at his home continuously, denying the opportunity to return to their hotel rooms for breaks. The degree of control Mr. Combs exercised over Miss Richard's daily life and basic needs exacerbated the significant power imbalance and threatening atmosphere that ensured Miss Richard's compliance with his demands. He regularly left the studio and required Dawn and Kalina to stay and write verses. Occasionally, Miss Richard tried to leave to get something to eat or go to her hotel. Whenever she tried to leave, Diddy would call and demand, "Where the fuck are you? We have an album to make." So there was no personal time allotted for her. Mr. Combs frequently made threats, especially if they asked for food or rest, stating, "You're a bitch." Damn. "I don't want to see your fucking face. I make niggas go missing, and I make things go away." Okay? Each time Miss Richard returned to the studio immediately, believing that Mr. Combs was capable of following through with his threats. Mr. Combs criticized Miss Richard for being too skinny, yet denied her request for food, and demanded that she drink only peanut butter shakes. So he just wanted you to get your protein strictly from shakes. Mr. Combs had full meals prepared by a chef and ate them in front of Miss Richard and Miss Harper, never offering them food. Miss Richard and Miss Harper begged for food and rest breaks, but Mr. Combs refused, making statements such as "absolutely fucking not," and "this is what it takes to be great," basically positioning it like, you ain't shit. I worked my fucking ass off to eat like this. You ain't nothing compared to me. That's basically what he's saying. And we all know he didn't do the work. He was the nigga, he was the oppressor for his artists. Basically, if we want to be real, you ain't had to do no fucking work. All you did was regulate shit. Mr. Combs' responses underscored the threat he posed and heightened Miss Richard's concerns for her safety and well-being. As Miss Richard continued to work nonstop, transitioning between the studio rehearsals, workouts, and back to the studio, she became severely dehydrated and experienced chronic stomach cramping from being undernourished and excessively thin. On the numerous occasions that she told Mr. Combs she was not feeling well, he called her lazy and dismissed her health concerns, instilling in her further apprehension of communicating her needs. And just if we're keeping score, by this time she had already been through this treatment for 4 years. In or around the summer of 2010, Miss Richard experienced abdominal pain, swollen glands, and a fever. She was hospitalized and diagnosed with arthralgia, which is joint pain due to overuse, sprains, tendinitis, and infection. She had anemia and a low white blood cell count. Ms. Richard presented Mr. Combs with her medical record, specifying that she needed to emphasize eating well, being adequately hydrated, and getting adequate rest, but Mr. Combs ordered her to report to the studio the next day for another multi-day recording session. Mr. Combs' blatant disregard for her health and well-being cemented Ms. Richard's fear of his authority and control over her career and health. Miss Richard continued to witness Mr. Combs' abuse toward Miss Ventura. Cassie often wore sunglasses and makeup in an attempt to hide visible injuries. These incidents further solidified Miss Richard's fear of him, as they were constant reminders of the physical dangers she potentially could and eventually would face. Mr. Combs often exhibited uncontrollable anger during recording sessions, throwing objects like albums, laptops, and food against the wall or at individuals. So he would rather throw food around than feed them. Good God. Mr. Combs frequently flew into frenzied, unpredictable rages. Miss Richard feared making any misstep that could direct his anger toward her. However, her fears went beyond her immediate physical safety. Because she had witnessed Mr. Combs' violent nature, a side of Mr. Combs that the world had yet not seen, she feared that falling out of his good graces, or worse, standing up to him or speaking out, could result in serious harm. Miss Richard frequently thought about Mr. Combs' threat about making people go missing and feared taking any action that could label her as a target. Once again, this is also corroborated by Lil Rod's most recent lawsuit, where he literally says Diddy used Tupac as an example of the type of niggas he could make go missing. Remember, this nigga Diddy told Lil Rod, nigga, I slap my own mama. I kill my mama if she fuck with me. So you know I don't care about you. This is what he said, not me. Despite Mr. Combs' violence, threats, and misogyny, Diddy Dirty Money experienced significant sales of records, selling 2 million copies of one single, 500,000 of another in the U.S., and in Australia, 5 million single copies. Miss Richard's unpaid wages and royalties are estimated at $1.2 million. So she's owed multiple millions. I think she said she was owed damn near $1.8 million off the first album with Danny DeCane. She said she was owed, no. She was owed like $1 million. She was owed $500,000 off the second album, and she was owed over $1 million in performance money off of doing 100 shows. Now she's saying with the Diddy Dirty Money album, her unpaid wages and royalties are estimated at 1.2. Right? Miss Richard's unpaid touring wages are estimated at over 350,000. So it's pretty safe to say he owes her somewhere in the upwards of nearly $4 million at this point. And this is just by 2010. Now we're getting into Ciroc, Diddy beats, and non-payment for this work. This shit wild. And there's so much more to it. In or around the summer of 2009, Miss Richard and Miss Harper were required by Mr. Combs to perform as part of Diddy Dirty Money and attended numerous promotional events, including later overnight parties, all of which were under contract between Mr. Combs and Ciroc Vodka or between Mr. Combs and Diddy Beats, pursuant to the Bad Boy Interscope record deal. Miss Richard was never compensated for the extra time she spent fulfilling his promotional contracts, including the Ciroc and Diddy Beats campaign. Mr. Combs was paid approximately $250,000 per Ciroc appearance. However, Mr. Combs never compensated Miss Richard or Harper for these appearances, other than just $5,000 each on a handful of occasions. So every now and then he would get him 5 racks. Mr. Combs' ongoing explanation for withholding compensation was that their appearances were a requirement for their tour. Additionally, Miss Richard was required to appear and promote Diddy Beats through parties, albums, songs, and videos. Over time, Mr. Combs was paid $6.25 million for 25 Ciroc shows that Miss Richard was required to attend. Following each show, Miss Richard and Miss Harper approached Mr. Combs to inquire about their insufficient and sporadic payments. Mr. Combs routinely responded with statements such as, "You bitches ain't grateful. You don't want this." Miss Richard estimates losses from the Ciroc campaign promotions totaling at least $1.5 million. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs received an advance on Diddy Beats, for which Miss Richard received no compensation. So basically, he's being paid for these, this is effectively like a promo tour. And a lot of times what the labels do with the promo tour is the artists are not paid for said promo tour. However, there is always money in exchange. So Diddy's getting money from Ciroc for these appearances, and he's having them come out perform these records for free. And every now and then, he might slide them $5,000. Mr. Combs harasses and assaults Miss Richard. Between approximately 2009 and 2011, throughout Diddy Dirty Money's recording process, rehearsals, and performances, Mr. Combs repeatedly ordered Miss Richard to strip down to her underwear. He frequently referred to her as a bitch or whore and made demeaning remarks about her body, alternatingly calling her lazy, fat, ugly, and skinny. How you gonna call her fat and skinny? Particularly in front of his friends, producers, and bodyguards. This shit is uncomfortable. Mr. Combs frequently held meetings with Miss Richard wearing only his underwear, as stated before, despite Miss Richard's protests and repeated requests for him to put on clothing. So at this point, he knows that it bothers her that he wears his underwear in the meetings, and he's doing it on purpose. That's what it tells me. In response, Mr. Combs called her a bitch and whore and reminded her that she should be grateful for the opportunity to be there. Often, while they were recording in the studio, Mr. Combs would hold parties where he would invite young men and women who were often scantily dressed and appeared underage to use drugs and engage in sexual acts. And once again, remember the young woman from Detroit who was allegedly in high school when Harve Pierre and some other man flew her from a lounge in Detroit to Jersey to come to this nigga house. And we saw photos of this young woman, high schooler, sitting on his lap with her skirt rising up above her hind area. So all of this stuff that we've been seeing this year, it literally adds up. Anybody who's being a Diddy apologist at this point, understand he is not going to see you. He's not going to find you. He's not going to sign you. He's not going to pay you. He's not going to do anything for you. This nigga is fucked up. Shall we continue? Miss Richard observed Mr. Combs and his colleagues kissing, groping, and inappropriately touching the young women. Upon information and belief, the participants often left the immediate area to have sex and returned shortly thereafter. On numerous occasions between approximately 2009 and 2011, under the guise of preparing for performances, Mr. Combs would intrude into Miss Richard's changing room at Daddy's house unannounced while she was undressed. Even though a female stylist was present and assisting Miss Richard with her wardrobe, Mr. Combs would grope Miss Richard's body, including her bare buttocks and her chest area near her breasts. With no legitimate purpose and without Miss Richard's consent, Mr. Combs caressed her buttocks to show the stylist where he wanted her high-waisted panties positioned and attempted to touch her breasts, claiming to show the stylist where he wanted her bra straps to go. This is disgusting. So he's coming in there while she's undressed, touching on her, and making it seem as though it's for the purpose of I want it to look like this. I want it to be here, here, and here. Just disgusting, nigga. When Mr. Combs would enter the changing room, Miss Richard would cover her chest with her hands to prevent Mr. Combs from seeing or touching her breasts. When Mr. Combs would touch her body, Miss Richard would attempt to swat his hands away and state, "Don't touch me." Mr. Combs frequently smacked Miss Richard's bare buttocks and often commented on her body, noting that although she was too skinny, she had an ass. This nigga's wild. Ignoring her visible and communicated discomfort, Mr. Combs persisted and continued to intrude when Miss Richard was in the dressing room, continued to touch her buttocks and breast area under the guise of showing the stylist what to do, and continued to smack her buttocks without her consent. In or around October 2010, Diddy Dirty Money performed in Glasgow, Scotland, where Mr. Combs engaged in overt sexual advances toward Miss Richard. On numerous occasions when Miss Richard exited the dressing room fully styled, Mr. Combs looked at her approvingly and smacked her buttocks while making comments such as, "You looking good. Okay, Don, okay." And I see what that is, in a flirtatious tone. Each time, Miss Richard moved away and asked him not to touch her, but he disregarded her protests. On their last night in Glasgow, Miss Richard witnessed Mr. Combs and several other males gangbanging. Wow. Mr. Combs' female assistant at the hotel pool. Miss Richard immediately left and went to her hotel room. Now, is this the same assistant as in Miss what was her name? Capricorn or something like that? Whoa. On their flight back to the US the next day, Miss Richard asked Mr. Combs where his assistant was. He replied, "I don't give a fuck where that bitch is." Miss Richard later learned that Mr. Combs had taken his assistant's passport with him to the US, leaving her stranded in the UK. Lock his ass up. In Glasgow, Miss Harper confided in Miss Richard that her husband and manager, Tony Vick, was abusive. Okay, so now we got Kalina coming to Dawn and confiding in her about the abuse she was dealing with at home. After an especially severe, so you know what's interesting? So Kalina, while witnessing what was going on with Cassie in that kitchen, Dawn, upon first seeing it happen, tried to intervene. Kalina said, "We getting out of here." Interesting. Now we find out she was being abused in her own home. After an especially severe assault, she confided in Miss Richard that she wanted to leave Mr. Vick, and Miss Richard helped her plan an exit from the relationship. However, Miss Harper and Mr. Vick reconciled, and both Mr. Combs and Mr. Vick, who had a close relationship, Jesus, learned of Miss Richard's role in helping. Both Mr. Combs and Mr. Vick became noticeably distrustful of Miss Richard, which exacerbated her fears and of harm and reprisal. So now she got both these niggas against her. When Mr. Combs would require his Diddy Dirty Money bandmates to stay at his residence in Miami, Miss Richard would barricade herself inside her room at night, placing heavy furniture against the door because she feared being harmed in her sleep. In or around late December 2010, Miss Richard, Miss Harper, and Miss Ventura were in Mr. Combs' Los Angeles home when Diddy stated, "I want to gift you fake titties for Christmas." My God. I want to gift you titties for Christmas. Fake was implied there. Mr. Combs reached out and cupped Miss Richard's breast without her permission and stated, "You're an A, I'm thinking a D." So he's like about to just make her get her breast done. Miss Richard recoiled in shock and left the room. Throughout the above-mentioned time period, when Miss Richard resisted his advances, Mr. Combs retaliated by denying her singing parts in songs, removing her from songs, refusing to allow her to sing in performances, and turning her mic off during performances. The more she rebuffed his advances, the more retaliatory he became. Jesus. Now we get into a false imprisonment allegation here. In or around December 2010, Diddy Dirty Money was preparing for an upcoming performance on SNL. As usual, rehearsals lasted for days without the opportunity to eat or rest, and the rehearsal schedule was unpredictable. After waiting all day for Mr. Combs to call or send a car, Miss Richard received a phone call from Mr. Combs demanding, "Where the fuck are you bitches? You bitches don't want this. Y'all don't deserve to have someone pick you up. Get a cab." So now, out of their limited funds, they got to pay to get their own transportation. Miss Richard and Miss Harper immediately took a taxi to Sir Studios at 520 West 25th Street, New York, anxious because Mr. Combs sounded enraged. Upon their arrival, Diddy and Harv Pierre were waiting for them in the lobby. He screamed obscenities at them. "Where the fuck were you bitches? You bitches don't want to win. You don't want this. I'm so tired of y'all." Miss Richard noticed that people in the lobby were reacting to his tirade. Embarrassed, she asked Mr. Combs to stop swearing and calling them bitches in front of everyone. Mr. Combs' facial expression shifted as he stepped towards Miss Richard, raised his arm, oh God, and swung his fist toward her face. Believing that Diddy was going to hit her, Miss Richard braced for the impact. Before he could strike her, Mr. Combs' bodyguard grabbed her, escorted her out of the studio, and forced her into the Bad Boy Records Bentley that was parked outside. Miss Harper ran after Miss Richard, and Mr. Combs' bodyguard closed and locked the Bentley doors with both women inside. Now I'm wondering which bodyguard this is. Is this Roger Bonds, the nigga that came out and was talking about his son in Africa, who still hasn't given us concrete information, but when Cassie's lawsuit initially came out, he tried to make it seem as though he had witnessed all of this shit and he was going to expose more? Or is this Gene Deal, who's been very vocal for many years on YouTube, telling people some of the things he's witnessed behind the scenes? Inside the vehicle, Miss Richard realized there were no interior door handles and that they were locked inside the car with no way to escape. Ain't that some crazy shit? Miss Richard's belongings were in the studio, but she was able to call her father from Miss Harper's cell phone. Miss Richard relayed to her dad what happened and that she needed help and feared she would go missing. Moments later, Mr. Combs' bodyguard removed only Miss Harper from the Bentley, leaving Miss Richard locked in the car alone for over 2 hours. She screamed as loudly as she could, but no one responded. It was late evening in the wintertime. The windows were heavily tinted, and the interior of the car was dark except for faint interior lights. Miss Richard's belongings and winter coat were in the studio while the ignition was off and there was no heat. I was just about to ask about that. With Mr. Combs' prior threats and violence running through her mind, she felt sheer panic, terror, and feelings of claustrophobia at being locked in a small, dark, enclosed space with no way to communicate or call for help. She began to feel cold and fear for her life, not knowing when or if she would be released. Dawn's father drove to New York from Baltimore and arrived at the studio approximately 2 hours later. Only after her father arrived and demanded to see her did Mr. Pierre order Mr. Combs' bodyguards to release her from the vehicle. Mr. Pierre ushered her dad between several rooms at the studio where he waited for approximately 2 hours before being able to confront Diddy. Once Miss Richard's father expressed that he intended to contact police, he warned him, "Think about your family and think about your daughter's career." Her father appeared visibly frightened by Mr. Combs' threats and actions, which in turn made Miss Richard feel terrified for herself and her family's safety. Just imagine being in this predicament. On one side, as a man, how you let this nigga punk you like that? And I'm not saying, that he was a punk. I'm just saying, if you drive 2 hours to come retrieve your daughter and you feel some type of way with this nigga, hey man, knock his ass out. Time I think about your family. Bitch, nigga, think about your fucking family, nigga. Think about your life tonight. Because he should have shot the motherfucker up. But it is what it is. But then again, put yourself in Don's position where your dad comes. He's supposed to be your protector. He gets all the way out there, confronts Diddy, and you see fear in his eyes when he say, think about your family. Yeah, you're going to feel helpless. It's crazy, man. Let's keep going. This shit long as fuck. The next night, Diddy Dirty Money performed on SNL. Mr. Combs subsequently called Miss Richard, complimented her performance, and concluded with a threat. He said, "You don't call your dad unless you're in the hospital." Oh, wow. Unjust enrichment of defendants by breach of contract and or copyright infringement. As a member of Danny D. Kane, Miss Richard has performed on over 15 songs and holds composition credits for more than 3. Defendants have failed to account to or pay Miss Richard as agreed for her compositions and her performances and have breached contracts and infringed her copyrights, all of which has unjustly enriched defendants. So out of the 15 songs she did with that group, she wrote more than 3. We don't know the exact number, but at least 3. As a member of Diddy Dirty Money, Miss Richard has performances recorded on over 9 songs. Additionally, Miss Richard has composition rights and credits on more than 5. Defendants have failed to account to or pay Miss Richard as agreed for her compositions and her... Oh, they got the actual... Damn, they got the list of the songs. Hold on. Okay, so these are all the songs that she appeared on. Got you. We'll go to the next thing. In 2020, okay, here we are. So we're going from 2011, 2000, you know what I mean? to 2020. So I guess they went a very long time without working together or speaking. We know that she did go on to do solo career, solo performances and things for a very long time. She was making her way in the industry after separating herself. One of the only to do so, as a matter of fact. In 2020, Mr. Combs selected Miss Richard for a reboot of Making the Band. And Miss Richard spent hours preparing to be a judge on the new show. However, the COVID-19 pandemic halted those plans, and Miss Richard was never compensated in any way. I don't see how you expect it to be compensated if it never happened, though. If you were just preparing, I don't know. Maybe you should have been compensated for your time, but did y'all film anything? On or about July 1st, 2021, Mr. Combs and Bad Boy Records directed Janice Combs Publishing, Inc. to assign its administration rights of Miss Richard's songs. Huh. Assign it to who? Or did they give his mom the rights to her songs? Is that what y'all are saying? So here we've got all the records that she wrote on, okay? So we've got Two Sides from Danity Kane. She's in the credits here. What is this percentage? 13% of said records. We've got 86, 20% share on that. Ain't Going. She had 2.5% on that from Danity Kane. Ass on the Floor, Diddy Dirty Money, 10%. Burn So Deep. This is a feature she did with Jimmy Edgar. She owned 50% of that. Dance, which is her own solo record. She had 25% of that. Faith. Her and Ricky Lewis had 50%. Fireflies, 25% from Zendaya. Flashback Interlude from Danity Kane, 25%. Hate You Now, Diddy Dirty Money, 2.5%. Home for Christmas, Danity Kane, 100% writer on that. And these are all allegedly unpaid royalties for songs that she has an ownership stake in on publishing. Hurt, Loving You No More from Diddy, 5%. Lights Out, Danity Kane, 50%. Love Come Down, Diddy, 10.62%. Perfectly Blind, Day 26. She was even writing for the niggas. 25%. Secret Place Interlude, Danity Kane, 10%. Stopwatch, 20%. Stopwatch Remix, 10%. Striptease Danity Kane, 6%. Strobe Lights, Diddy Dirty Money, 5%. Tailor Made Suit, Lil Mo. Damn, they got her here for a 0. Damn. Danity Kane Tell Me, one of their biggest records, 16.67%. Yeah, you would. Diddy Dirty Money, 5%. Okay? All right, so let's go back to this. On or about July 1st, 2021, Mr. Combs and Bad Boy Records directed Janice Combs Publishing, Inc. to assign its administration rights of Miss Richard's songs held from her tenure with defendants in the years 2005 to 2012 to Sony Songs, a division of Sony Music Publishing. Okay, so the music that Diddy's mom, for some reason, had ownership of, they gave the administration rights over to Sony. Got it. And again, I've talked about publishing administration on this channel quite a few times. They just supervise the records. When artists want to get clearances on samples and stuff like that, the administration company will basically just forward you an email and say, do you want to sign off on this? Yes or no. It makes it easier than somebody actually coming to you with their offer, their everything, you signing off and, whatnot. And the administration company receives a percentage based on doing that administrative work. Okay. The assignment signed by Miss Richard on October 22nd, 2024. What? We ain't even made it to October 22nd, 2024. So maybe this is from 2023 because this is when Diddy said he was going to give everybody their shit. That's a typo though. So let's read that again while correcting it. The assignment signed by Ms. Richard on October 22nd, 2023 purported to credit through a semi-annual accounting Ms. Richard's royalty account for Ms. Richard's compositions from between 80 to 90% of publishers' share. All right. So this is basically when he agreed to give everybody their publishing back, those that were supposed to work with him or get that back. They were supposed to never come out. Remember, Aubrey O'Day said the stipulation was if he gives you your pub back, you would have to sign a non-disclosure to where you can never speak on him, to him, or about him ever again. It seems that Dawn received such agreement, and now we have her still coming out anyway, which I salute. Get your money or get your agreement to receive said money, and I'm still gonna go on your ass. Y'all may say that's not honoring the deal. I say fuck that nigga deal. He deserve it. Let's keep going. However, no statements were ever provided, no payments were ever made, and no reversions nor assignment were ever recorded with performance rights organizations or other royalty collecting entities by defendants or by Sony. Let's stop here. So what she's literally saying is, despite this whole grandstanding that they did, where he came out and said everybody was getting their shit back, and you had all these artists talking about, yeah, I signed the paperwork, Diddy reached out to me, I'm supposed to get my shit back, and there was this whole, a lot of people were trying to salute him for changing the game and letting everybody get, you know what I mean? She's saying, despite all of the paperwork I signed in which I was supposed to receive it back, none of the work to direct my royalties to me have been made. So it was literally all for optics. Again, Aubrey O'Day said, why would he come out and do this? He's definitely preparing for something. He wants to look good for some reason. We'll continue. Oh, this shit pissed me off. The sexual assault stuff pisses me off as well. But this shit pisses me off too. Defendants have wholly failed to account to or pay Ms. Richard as agreed for her compositions and her performances in breach of the assignment and have thereby infringed her copyrights, resulting in defendant being unjustly enriched. During the summer of 2023, Mr. Combs' new record company, Love Records, tendered a contract for negotiation to Ms. Richard for the song entitled Deliver Me, embodied as track 3 on the Love album Off the Grid, officially released on September 15, 2023. Upon information and belief, Deliver Me sold well prior to Mr. Combs' legal troubles in November of 2023. Continuing to the present, Ms. Richard sought to establish her rightful percentage as a 21% composer on Deliver Me. Mr. Combs personally called Ms. Richard and left a voicemail complaining about her fair request. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs directed his attorneys to avoid confirming the composition percentages on the song and, in fact, list composers who played no part in composing the song. As a result, the contract was never signed by neither Ms. Richard or Love Records Incorporated. Nevertheless, Ms. Richard obtained a copyright registration certificate on a timely basis. Said registration lists authors and claimants as agreed when the song was created in 2009. So she wasn't physically there for none of this new music. Okay, salute. So Diddy went back to the old archives and basically had somebody reproduce this song that she created back in 2009 for his new album, rework it, probably took lyrics, created a new beat around it, but the original writer was Dawn. Now, after you get all of these other people involved, they say, hey, 20%, or at least that's what she requested. He says, this is unfair. Nah, I'm not doing it. Bitch ass nigga, you gonna go back to my song from goddamn 13, 14 years ago and you still don't want to pay me. Fuck you. That registration is filed separately in the court and supports Ms. Richard's claim of copyright infringement by defendants herein. Defendant Love Records Inc. and Mr. Combs infringed Miss Rashad's copyrights in the composition of Deliver Me by releasing Deliver Me without her permission and without compensation. So that answered a big question to me, because I literally was like, why is she on this album? Why did she go back and work with this nigga? Now we know she didn't. He was just supposed to pay her by going back and using some old shit that she did. And I think she was a credited performer on that record as well. So her voice is literally on there without being paid, just like the rest of the music. As a result of the acts and conduct complained of herein, Ms. Rashad has suffered and will continue to suffer the losses of income, wages, benefits, royalties, promotional fees, touring fees, and other compensation. She's also suffered, among other things, future pecuniary losses, emotional pain, suffering, inconvenience, loss of enjoyment of life, PTSD, anxiety disorder, insomnia, panic attacks, and other non-pecuniary losses, entitling her to an award of compensatory and punitive damages, injunctive and declaratory relief, attorney's fees and costs, and other remedies at this court may deem appropriate. Okay? Now, I'm going to skim through this to see if there's anything in here that needs to be addressed. All right. So first cause of action, violation of the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Act. Now, remember, that was the act that Cassie was able to file her lawsuit under because these cases couldn't be addressed criminally, so they could only be addressed civilly. Okay. Plaintiff repeats and realleges each and every allegation in all of the preceding paragraphs as if fully set forth herein. The above described conduct of Mr. Combs, including but not limited to Mr. Combs' physical and SA harassment, unlawful imprisonment of plaintiff in New York City, constitutes a crime of violence and is a crime of violence motivated by gender. The term crime of violence means an act or series of acts that would constitute a misdemeanor or felony against a person as defined in state or federal law if the conduct presents a serious risk of physical injury to another, whether or not those acts have actually resulted in criminal charges, prosecution, or conviction. And the term crime of violence motivated by gender means a crime of violence committed because of gender or on the basis of gender and due, at least in part, to an animus based on victim's gender. Okay, so we've pretty much gone through all of this. She's restating this as it pertains to gender-based violence. Okay. Just scrolling through here to see if there's anything else in discovery here. But I don't think so. I think these are just, the different counts. That those allegations would fall under. So we'll go ahead and conclude this because we already been here long enough. As y'all can see, this nigga ain't shit. As we already knew, this nigga ain't shit. This ain't new, you know what I mean? It ain't gonna sway nobody no left or right. But it deserves to be known because Don had remained quiet for so many years. And I think a lot of us were definitely questioning why she was a part of that last album. That answer was definitely answered here. Okay? Now, as stated before, there's video of an interview where she was asked about the time when she worked with Diddy on the show Making the Band. We're going to go ahead and play that so that y'all can physically hear Don allude to some of the things that were referred to in this lawsuit. She didn't say them in, explicit terms, but you get the gist of, where she was going. Unfortunately, the interviewers that she was sitting with, they felt like Diddy was grooming her for success, but of course they were not privy to the abuse.
And they were the worst people ever. And I don't care if this is not. And I did not, I didn't know when Puff found out that I was still signed. I didn't know he wanted me. I just knew he was like, you're signed and that's illegal from the contract, so you going home. And every day after we would do a thing, he would bring me in and be like, I don't know what's going on, but they won't let you go. Are you having sex with these guys? Like, what's going on with this? And he'd be like, you're not even worth it. You going home. And I would go to my room and I would be waiting for them to send, and the next day I wouldn't get sent home. And he would do it every day, and I would literally be so stressed out. Like I was so skinny. My dad was stressed out because from what I heard, they were calling my dad like, how do we get them out of this? So they were asking Puff for a lot of money. Right. To get me out of the contract. I didn't know any of this was going on. I just know he got me in, and he kept telling me, I'm going to send you home. And he did that.
Did you want to punch him in the face?
No, because he did other things that were crazy that made me want to punch him. Like bringing us in a room and saying, you're ugly, like you got to fix your face. Like wild stuff. Like Puff was but he was preparing us for what the industry would be. But if we would have done what we did in this time, Puff would have been crucified. Because you can't talk to women now. Like the levels of what he was saying was like, it was aggressive. It was really aggressive. It was crazy. And then the last day when I was about to pick the band, he made me change 12 times. And I didn't know why. Because I just knew I was going home. There would be no way that I didn't think he would buy a contract. I didn't know what was going on. And the reason why he was making me change is because he was going to pick me that whole time. But he made me feel like shit and be stressed out because he wanted to see if I would be off my game. If it would change me in any way. Mm-hmm. Then he would be like, she's not worth it. I had no clue. I just thought he was like, trash.
He was trying to make you force your way out. Right.
And I just never...
And you didn't fold?
No, I had no choice. I mean, when the last time anybody from New Orleans was ever had an opportunity? I kept...
All right. So that's pretty much all the verbal indication we have from Dawn. Unfortunately, it seems to be a little mixed. Like she hated him, but there was still some sort of, appreciation for the amount of preparation she received from that experience. And again, maybe she just wasn't ready to tell the entirety of that story at that time. But again, for people that don't believe victims, something like that might make somebody question the validity of said lawsuit. I don't stand on that side because there's too much in that lawsuit that's been basically repeated. And this goes back very far, back to the 90s, this pattern of behavior. So I'm not discrediting her. She was kind of alluding to some of it, but some of it also sounded a bit endearing. Let me know what y'all think of all this down below in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video. If this is your first time seeing me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, become an insider. And I'm going to catch you all on the next one. Prayers up for Dawn Richard. You know, I can only imagine what type of mental anguish she's gone through over the past decade and some change. But I'm hoping at some point she's able to find the peace that she needs. She's been out here still holding it down, still hustling, still working within the industry, which a lot of artists that came from that tutelage have not been able to do. So, yeah, salute to you, and I salute the courage for coming out and letting this shit be known, because you could have went to your grave with it like so many others probably have. Once again, let me know what y'all think of this down below in the comments. Much love and respect, y'all. Peace.
King of my city and cul-de-sac. Coming out swinging like soldier rag. Leading my people like quarterback. Boy, I study this shit on my almanac. Had to get up and grind. Knowledge is booming, I'm here to apply. Came with the chip and the dip, it just single the mind. We finna do more than survive. I need my check. Spinning the block for the Gouda. We hitting the jeweler to flood out the net. We don't do beef on computers, I'm straight out the sewer. We come when you rest. Niggas be looking perplexed, so keeping my foot on their neck. No map, I trust my gut for the quest. With drama, I'm fully abreast. I was ready for years and they doubted me. All of a sudden they tell me they proud of me. I been dropping these haters like calories. Cross them out, I came back with some boundaries. Stand for my honor, but too raw, no corner. Packing the stick with a drummer. Wanna catch my bad, won't fumble. I done came too far to be humble.